Good morning, students. We are going to look at ecological relationship. Ecological relationship. We have before now talked about habitat, and we said habitat are environment that animals or organisms live. We got to adaptation, and we said adaptation are changes or adjustments in organisms that makes them to be able to live in their habitat, okay, or get adapted to their habitat. And we yesterday talked about some adaptive features of some organisms that makes them to be able to live in their habitat. And we look at adaptive features of fish, frog, toad, bird, forest animals, desert animals, and so on and so forth. And I know I gave you an assignment, and I believe you should have been done with it. Okay, this morning we are going to talk about ecological relationship, and we are going to be ending. This is going to be our last topic for habitat, adaptation, organisms, and so on and so forth. So when you hear the word ecology, ecological is gotten from the word ecology. What is ecology? Ecology is an area of biology that has to do with relationship between organisms in their environment. Relationship between organism and its environment. Relationship between organisms and its environment. Relationship between organisms and its environment. And this morning we are going to place our focus on food chain, okay? All right, let's look at our specific objective for this lecture. At the end of this lesson, you should be able to define ecology, define food chain, give some examples of food chain, state 4 trophic levels of food chain, explain 4 trophic levels of food chain, give examples of each of the trophic levels of food chain. Now let's go into it. Ecology. This is a branch of biology that deals with the interactions of organisms to one another and to their physical environment. What are we, or what is this definition saying? In a nutshell, ecology is a branch of biology, is an area in biology, okay, that has to do with interactions of animals, of organisms, or relationship, organisms relating together or interacting together, okay, to their physical environment. So you can say that ecology is a branch of biology that deals with the relationship between organisms and its environment. Relationship between organisms and its environment, or to its environment, okay? Now let's look at it. Okay, food chain. Food chain. What is food chain? This is a linear sequence of organisms through which nutrients and energy pass as one organism eats another. What are we saying? We are saying this is the transfer of energy, or this is a gain in energy, not even a transfer. This is a gain in energy by an organism. Gain in energy and nutrients by an organism Okay, let me break it down for you. Now, we are saying that food chain is a process whereby organisms gain energy and nutrients by eating one another. I think that could be the watered definition. I'm trying to water it down for your understanding. Okay? Now this is a topic that is treated not just in JS1, all through to even to your SS3, even to the higher level of in the university. So we try to make the definition to come down to your level. So a food chain is a process. A food chain is a channel. A food chain is a medium whereby organisms gain nutrients and energy as they eat one another. Okay? Now, it goes in a chain, just as the name says, food chain. It's a chain. It goes in a chain, linear, from this to this, from this to this. It progresses in that nature. Okay? It does what? It progresses in that nature. That's why I said it's a progress or process or a medium where organisms, gain energy and nutrients as they eat one another. Now look at one example that we have here. Plants. What do I say? Plants. From plants, goats, man, lion. You can see the chain, how it is going. Plants, goats, man, lion. It's a linear chain. It's not complex. It's linear, a straight path. Okay, that's why I said it's a channel or a path, a pathway. Now, see the plant. You know, plants makes their food through photosynthesis, whereby they gain light from the sun and they use it in what? In processing their food. Okay? Now, they are also autotrophs. They are also what? Autotrophs. They make their own food. Autotrophs is a process whereby one makes its own food on its own. So they are autotrophs. Okay? Now, you see that goats feed on plants such as grasses, wheats, grasses, plants, and so on, and crops, and so on and so forth. When you take your goats to the farmland, it start eating up your crops and so on. So goats feed from plants. Plants here is the producer. Plant here is the what? Producer in this food chain. We are referring to the startup of the food chain. Plants here is the startup. Producer is the startup of the food chain. Remember, we said that the food chain is a chain. Okay, a chain whereby organisms get energy and nutrients by eating one another. Remember, this is under ecology. We say that it is the interaction of organisms to its environment. So plants here is the producer. It starts the food chain, is the startup. It starts the food chain. Now the goats get its nutrients by feeding on the plant. And when it feeds on the plant, it gets its energy. It has fed on the plant. Now, the goat here is the primary consumer. Is the what? Primary consumer, which is referred to as herbivores. Herbivores are animals that feed on plants. Herbivores are animals that does what? Feed on plants. So goat here is the primary consumer. It consumes the plant. And animals that feed on plants are what? Herbivorous animals. Cows, they feed on plants too. They are herbivorous what? Animals. Now, we started with plants as the producer, autotrophs making their own food. Now, in the presence of sunlight, you know that goats now feed on the plants, making goats the primary consumer, which are also called herbivores, animals that feed on plants. Now, the next is man. Of course, you know man eats goat meat. Okay, it doesn't eat goat as in blood, like raw goat. He eats the meat. He cooks the meat. Oh, you eat goat meat, right? So man eats goat meat, making man the secondary consumer. Secondary consumer. Omnivores animals. Remember, goats are herbivorous animals. Man now, omnivorous animals or organisms that feed on animal sources or animal source or animal products, just such as meat, animal meat, goat's meat, and so on, chicken meat, and so on and so forth. So making them the secondary consumer. Omnivores are secondary consumers. Secondary consumers could also be carnivorous animals. Now, you see lion is the tertiary consumer, because lion eats man. When you get to the forest now and you come across a lion, it will just devour you and eat you. So making lion a carnivorous animal, the tertiary consumer. Carnivore animals are animals that eat fellow animals. Of course, you know man is an animal, so he eats fellow animals. Okay. Now, this is one of the example of a food chain. You can see how it is being arranged linearly, straight. Now, it's telling you that from this gets its own from this gets from this gets. Remember, the definition says that this is a process where energy and nutrients are gotten by eating one another. Organisms eat one another to get energy and nutrients. Let's go on. Trophic levels of food chain. Trophic levels. This is what I've discussed already with this example, so we're not going to dwell too much on it. I use this. This is a trophic level, and we said number one, producers, primary consumers, secondary consumers, and tertiary consumers. We have other trophic levels of food chain, down to decomposers, where you have the scavengers and so on and so forth. But we don't want to. It's not for your level. We are for this course. For this level of study, we are going to focus our attention on these 4 trophic levels of food chain: the producer, the primary consumer, secondary consumer, and tertiary consumer, which is this example I've given here. So now look at it now. This is now a pictorial representation of the food chain of an oil. Oil is a bird, is a species of a bird. Oil. Now you can see plants, producer. You can see what? Plant, producer. Okay? Now, you can see herbivorous animal, insects. Insect is an herbivore animal. Remember, I said herbivorous animals are animals that feed on plants. You can see the arrow. This is a chain. This is a chain. And remember, herbivorous animals, I told you, they are primary consumers. Now, this mouse is an animal, omnivore animal. Okay? It feeds on the insects. It feeds on the insects. And the oil feeds on the mouse. And the oil feeds on the mouse. So this is an example of a food chain in a pictorial form. Remember, we said carnivore animals are animals that feed on other animals. So you can see plants, producer. I told you that the producer is the start-up of the food chain. Now, producer, herbivore, which is primary consumer, secondary consumer, which is omnivore, carnivore animals, which is also the tertiary consumers. This is a trophic level for your level. This is the trophic level of a food chain. Producer, primary consumer, secondary consumer, tertiary consumer. Now let's look at the definition, and I think we'll be done for this class. Now, producers, these are the primary factor of the food chain. Primary factor, it means that this is the startup. In short, there is no food chain. There cannot be a food chain if there is no producer. Okay? So this is the primary factor, the main factor of the food chain. It's the one that starts the food chain. So they are the startup. Can you see? They are the what? So when I say write about the producers, you can define it in this way. They are the producers. Now, they are autotrophs. Remember, I told you autotrophs are what would you call? What would you call? Organisms or plants that has the tendency or the ability to make their own food. Okay, so they are autotrophs and are more often photosynthetic and organisms. I'm taking it bits so that you will get the message. These are primary factor of the food chain. These are the primary factor of the food chain. They are the main factor of the food chain. That's what it's talking about. They are the startup. They are autotrophs and are more often photosynthetic organisms. Remember, photosynthetic organisms, they make their own food through the presence of sunlight and so on and so forth. Examples are plants, algae, etc. Now, primary consumers, the organisms that eat the producers, are called the primary consumers. Remember, I showed you, you can see a pictorial representation. This is a primary consumer. Primary consumer, goats, that eats the producer, plants. Remember this example. So we are saying that the primary consumers eat the producers. They are also known as herbivores. I've said that before. Herbivores are animals that eat plants. You can see plant eaters, though they could also be algae eaters. Please don't forget it. I've explained these trophic levels of food chain: producers, primary consumers, and secondary consumers. These are organisms that eat the primary consumers. The organisms that eat the primary consumers are called the secondary consumers. The secondary consumers generally are meat eaters. Meat eaters. They get meat from animal sources. They could either be omnivores or carnivores. I told you that omnivores are animals that eat meat and eat animal sources like meat, eggs, and so on. Man is an omnivore because we can eat meat, animal sources, animal products, and so on. Carnivores, same thing. Carnivores even eat the animal itself raw. Okay, so now tertiary consumers. The organisms that eat the secondary consumers are called the tertiary consumers. These are carnivore eating omnivores or carnivores. Now you can see from this example: plant, goat, man, lion. Plant is a producer. Okay, they are the primary factor, the main factor of the food chain. Goat is a primary consumer. They are herbivores because they are plant eaters. Man eats goats, animal sources, meats, so they are omnivores. Of course, carnivores also eat animal sources. Lion can eat goat meat. So lion now eats man, which makes it a carnivore eating another animal eating another animal. So get it in this manner. Okay, all right, see your assignment. Give 5 examples of a food chain. I've given you one here. I've given you even 2. This is one, but don't put it down for me. Don't put it down in your assignment. This is one example of a food chain. This is another example of a food chain: plants, goat, man, lion. Don't put this down for me. Give me yours. 5 examples of a food chain. Give 10 organisms each of the 4 different trophic levels of food chain mentioned above. Look at the 4 different. These are the 4 different levels of food chain that we discussed. We have other levels of food chain that continues after the tertiary consumers, that gets down to the decomposers. Okay, when you research on it, you are going to see a lot, but this is for your level. So you are going to give me 10 examples of. You're going to give 10 organisms each of the 4 different trophic levels of food chain mentioned above. Okay, so you give me 10 examples of producers, 10 examples of primary consumers, 10 examples of secondary consumers, 10 examples of tertiary consumers. Okay, all right. Of course, you should know that producers are mostly what? Plants, grasses, and so on. So you can give me the examples of whatever plants and so on and so forth. You give me 10 examples of primary consumers, secondary consumers, tertiary consumers. All right, I want to believe that you understood this lecture. We started by defining ecology, and we say it's a branch of biology that deals with the interaction of organisms to one another and to their physical environment. And I said that you should take it that is a branch of biology that deals with the relationship of organisms to its environment. And we came here and spoke about food chain, and we said this is a process whereby organisms gain energy and nutrients by feeding on one another. And you've seen an example, feeding on one another. They gain energy and nutrients through this means. And we talk of the trophic levels of food chain: producers, primary consumers, secondary consumers, tertiary consumers. We gave a pictorial representation of a food chain, and we started explaining what a producer is, primary consumer is, secondary consumer, and tertiary consumers. You're going to do this assignment for me, and you will add it up to the one I gave you yesterday, and you're going to submit it on Monday on or before 10 a.m. in the morning. Alright, look at the assignment. 1. Give 5 examples of a food chain. Give 10 organisms each of the 4 different trophic levels of food chain mentioned above. Define the following terms: autotrophs, herbivores, omnivores, carnivores. Alright? Okay, at this point in time, we are going to draw the curtain for this lecture. Till I come your way again next week, I still remain your tutor, Mr. Evans Olise. Okay? Stay safe. God bless you.